We can see that as well in the next poem, which is probably his most famous single poem. And that, of course, is the Tyger. You remember I showed you the Tyger that Blake drew, right? I think I saw a booty cat. You know, this little, really very, very frightening Tyger indeed. Now, how does our speaker begin? Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night. Where are the forests of the night? Halfway between here and Morrow. Maybe, I don't know. Where are they? In the mind. Some of you have heard me say this before, but it's worth saying again, maybe. And that is, if anybody ever asks you where anything is in the poetry of William Blake, what should be your answer? In the mind. If you see that about him, everything will follow. That is his essential point. What is the deepest reality there is? It is the reality of the human imagination. The reality of the human mind. That's where everything is. That's where this Tyger is, and that's where the night is. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? For symmetry. In other words, not only is this man looking at a Tyger, but he's asking the fundamental question about the Tyger. And what is that? Who made it? I don't know why they didn't print the Lamb. They should have done. It's the parallel poem for this one. You remember if you've read it, or even if you hadn't, you can tell. When the child says, "Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee food and gave thee all? Who made you?" And he answers, "Little lamb, I'll tell thee. Little lamb, I'll tell thee." He's asking the same question. Who made the lamb? And now I'll tell you. God made it. He became a little lamb. He became a little child. And everything is wonderful. Everything's beautiful in the garden. Here, instead of seeing nature as a lamb, how does our experienced imagination see nature? Nature is no longer a matter of lambs, it's a matter of tigers. And who made the tiger? What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Who made the tiger? He doesn't have an answer, does he? Questions again, but no answer. In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? Whoever created the Tyger, it was far away and strange and mysterious, wasn't it? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? You see what's happening here? He looks at the Tyger, is absolutely terrified of the Tyger. Horrible beast. And so he starts asking, who made the Tyger? What hand made it? What wing helped make it? What eye helped make it? What leg helped make it? The logic is very simple. If nature is full of tigers, and the tigers are horrible, then what must we assume about the force, the being, the God, whoever it is, that created the tiger? He is even more horrible, presumably. That kind of terrible logic there. Now, you will notice that the speaker cannot even conceive of anything divine or anything godlike except in fragments. Why do I say that? What immortal hand? That's just a fragment. Did you ever see that old horror movie about the hand that moves? That sort of really old cheap 1950 sort of campy one. But the hand that gets cut off and it takes on a life of its own. Well, that's sort of what we have here. What immortal hand? Or eye. In other words, when he conceives of God or the divine or the spiritual, can he conceive of it in anything like a healthy, whole way? Like a living spirit? No, it's bits and pieces, parts is parts, right, of this horrible monster that creates other monsters. And he goes on, he says, and what shoulder? See, there it is again, another of this sort of anatomical pieces of this horrifying God who created the tiger. And what art can twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? It's almost like Frankenstein, isn't it? It lives and lives, as if, the old Frankenstein movie, when the Frankenstein monster begins to, it's hard to beat and all the rest. And it is literally terrifying. He's thinking about it, and he can't imagine it except as a horrifying sort of birth of, if you know William Butler Yeats' great poetry, you will remember his Second Coming, in which he wonders what rough beast its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem, ready to be born. And you remember that the indignant desert birds are, the image is one of horror, isn't it? It really is. And the same thing here. Who made you? Something horrible. What are you? Something horrible. Where did they make you? Somewhere horrible. In essence, this man, I think, is engaged in a kind of imaginative act of scaring himself to death. Now, how does Blake communicate that to his poem? If we look at the page upon which this poem appears, what do we have? A little quiet look. How terrible is the tiger? It's even got a smile. It looks like that. And this man, though, can't see that. He sees the tiger of his mind, the tiger of the forest, the dark forest of his mind. And it is a terrifying thing. And if nature is that way, then God must even be more terrible. And how was he created? What the hammer? What the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? Not only is God broken up into pieces, but what is the act of creation, of the creation of nature become? What does that sound like to you? What the hammer? What the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? Nature was created in a factory. In that way, nature is a kind of hellish machine created in a kind of hellish, infernal factory. What the anvil? What dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? Who could have held on to such a creature? Who could have held it long enough to forge it properly? And so on and so on. And notice, how does every sentence in the poem end? A question. Questions. Is he getting anywhere? Is he answering any of these questions? No. The only place he's getting is deeper and deeper and deeper into the forest of the night. The tiger is terrible to begin with and more terrible by the end of the poem. God at the beginning is terrible and more terrible. And so instead of man and nature and God, that is, man, nature, and the divine all being harmonious and one, which is what you see constantly in the Songs of Innocence, what do we got here? Man cut off from nature and cut off from the divine. Absolutely alienated by his own imagination. He says, when the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears. In other words, even the stars in the heaven reacted how when they saw this horrible thing being created? They were afraid of it, weren't they? They had almost attacked. They threw down spears. You don't know whether they threw down their spears to try to kill the tiger before it could get going, because they were so horrified, or whether they just felt like we might as well give up and throw down our spears if anything that's terrible is going to be great. It doesn't really matter. But in some sense, harmony between the elements of nature has been destroyed. When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who make the lamb make thee? It's a purely rhetorical question. He doesn't believe for 1 minute that the God who made the tiger could make the lamb. In fact, what he wants to know is what kind of God could have created this horrible thing? Did he smile his work to see? If so, I think he thinks if he did, what kind of God would he be? Kind of sadistic, horrible. There is a God and he has an evil streak. There may be pure evil. He has gotten himself to that point of view. What is the true answer to the question, did he who make the lamb make thee? Yes. Well, God made lambs and tigers. He made reason and imagination. He made feeling and analysis. He made form and content. He made life and death. And if you can accept both of those, just as if you can accept innocence and experience, what might you eventually rise to? Organized innocence. How do you think this guy's doing? No way Jose is he. He is as deep into the forest of the night as he possibly can be. And how do we know? What is the purest sort of expression of that? Look at the last stanza. Tiger, tiger, burning bright, in the forests of the night. What immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? What is the relationship between the last stanza of that poem and the first stanza? Changes one verb, but other than that, it is the same. What is Blake telling us by doing that? And I guarantee you, he's telling us something. Where has this speaker gotten to? Nowhere. He has gone in a terrible circle and is right back where he was, except for one thing. You're quite right. He changes one verb, and that change is very significant. See, there is proof positive. Every important poet, every great writer thinks about what every word means. And here, it starts out, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry. That's a fairly neutral verb, isn't it? An auxiliary verb. Could. Who could have done it? I was amused by Dennis Rodman's response when he was questioned in the discussions after the Bulls' latest victory over the Utah Jazz. And, he made several, if you watch basketball, he made several free throws at the end of the game, and he's not notable for making free throws. And they asked him, how did you make 5 out of 6 there to put your point in the game? And most anybody else would have said, well, I'm very fortunate to have been lucky, and something like that. Dennis Rodman, is not the sort of person who's going to give a conventional response. He got this sort of completely bewildered look on his face, and he said, who knew? He got a little bit crazy. Who knew? He said, I don't know. I don't know where it came. Who could have supposed? Who could have guessed? Well, this is sort of like that. Who could have done it? It's sort of neutral. I don't know. Who could have done it? But by the time he gets to the end of the poem, what? Who could dare to do it? What immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? What's the difference between could and dare to? Yes, it's like, how could he have done such a thing? And also, at this point, he is saying that not just who could have done it, but given the horrors of the Tyger, what horrible being could have had the chutzpah, the gall, the horrible, sort of satanic energy to have created this thing? And it becomes, as you say, a kind of accusation, and also much more fearful. Who could have dared to do such a thing? In other words, if he's frightened at the beginning of the poem, what is he at the end? More frightened. That's the only thing he's been able to achieve. Has he heard the voice of the bard calling the lapsed soul? Is he ever going to be able to do away with the darkness and call back the light? Well, it ain't looking good, is it? And yet, what a powerful poem. I mean, almost primordially powerful. We may not, I remember reading this when I was really just a kid, I guess 8 or 9, and I had no clue what was going on. I really didn't. And in a way, the only way you can understand it is to put it alongside Blake's other work and sort of see how it fits in. But, and I hope, what I've just said amounts to, I think, a fairly serious and fairly honest account of what most scholars of Blake would say today, and I think that's right. I think they're right about that. But if you don't love a poem like this primarily for its kind of magical, incantatory power, quite apart from what it symbolically means, just the music of it. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry. It's in the expression. It's in the power of the language. The daring images like, and when the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who make the lamb make thee? There is a kind of daring, a kind of immediacy, a kind of sharpness, a kind of unforgettable vividness and plainness in those words that really marks Blake as a very special kind of poet. Next time we will spend just a couple of minutes wrapping up Blake, but we will get on, of course, in a serious way to Wordsworth. And I will basically spend most of next week, if not all of next week, on Wordsworth. He's obviously going to be one of my major exhibits. You'll notice on your syllabus that I ask you to read pages 48, it starts off, to page 92. So it's a pretty healthy selection there. But I planned it so we'd get it over a weekend so you'd have a little bit more time. Try to give it as much attention as you possibly can. What we're looking at there are mostly the poems that appeared in Wordsworth's first groundbreaking major book, which of course you identified for me correctly the first day as lyrical ballads, right? And what we're looking at is the poems from Wordsworth's lyrical ballads of 1798 and 1800. And so we'll be venturing on to another phase of romanticism. See you there.